So I wanted to talk about narcissism, and I will be very upfront about the fact that I don't know much about narcissism. I have just been around two narcissists, like two major ones in my life. I've dated a few narcissists, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. All I can say about my credentials is that I'm a very vulnerable person at times, a very volatile person at times, and I have been ensnared, I guess you can say. I've been ensnared by narcissists, and I'm very scared of becoming one, because my father was one. And he's one of the main people who affected me in my life. And I also think that narcissists are very susceptible to taking on ideologies that are very extreme, like an extreme interpretation of Islam, for example, or extreme interpretations of Christianity, and using that to make themselves look good. And I wanted to talk about it because I feel like it's not talked about enough. And there's so many things that need to be spoken about that aren't spoken about because they're uncomfortable, or they're still really close to you, or they were really close to you and you just don't want to revisit that emotion again. But I would like to talk about it and hopefully not cry, because I'm very well dressed right now and I'd rather not have to do this all over again. But I wanted to talk about it because it's important to me as a subject. And I know how vulnerable I am to being ensnared by narcissists and sociopaths, because I've lived my life ensnared by two of them up until recently. My current boyfriend is a wonderful human being. He's extremely empathetic. He listens. He treats me like an equal. With both of the main narcissists, sorry, I'm going to keep doing that because I cannot speak. Both of the same narcissists in my life, both of the narcissists in my life, who were a major part of it. One was my father, who I was around for about 20 years, and the other was my ex, who I was with for nearly 3 years. It was about 2.5 years. They both had the same sort of ways of getting around me, and it's bizarre because after leaving my dad, I got into that relationship, and I don't know how I allowed that to happen. So a few things about my dad. He's extremely psychotic. He destroyed almost every good relationship in his life. He had a bad relationship with my mother, although my mother put up with a lot of it. He had a bad relationship with my mother, his sisters. He had a bad relationship with every woman in his life except me up until 2015. And he would do this thing where he would break all these relationships around him and then keep me and my siblings, away from those people. So that's something that I've noticed is very common with narcissists. They keep you away from people you love because they're under the guise of being protective, or not trusting them, or having them influence you. And that's what I've noticed. He would also be extremely charming to everyone who wasn't a part of that circle. So his friends that he made at the mosque or the masjid, he would make very good friends with those people, and they would think that he was a great person, and they would come to him for advice. And like sometimes that mask would fall off because he had no meaningful relationships in his life besides the relationship with me as his daughter. So I think he told a story one time about how someone had come to him for advice about a wife to marry, because in Islam you don't really date, you just headhunt for a wife. They give you a CV, well, in my culture anyway, they give you a CV, and then if you like what's on paper, you marry the girl. You don't really date and go out for dinners and spend time with that person. You just get married. So this gentleman had come to my father for advice about who he should marry, and the boy's perspective was that he wanted to marry someone he could be friends with, so someone who had similar interests to him, and what you would normally look for in a partner, whether or not you were interested in an arranged marriage or a love marriage. You would look for someone who you could get along with. My father gave him the advice that he should find someone who he didn't get along with, and when he told me that, I was like, what are you talking about? Because I didn't understand it at the time. And what he basically told the boy was that this woman that you're going to marry, she's going to clean your toilet for you. Would you ever want a friend to clean the toilet for you? And the guy kind of just walked away. He didn't even respond. And my dad went off about how men don't understand how households are meant to be run now. If you marry a friend, you're never going to order them to do anything. I mean, the logic in his head probably follows, because to him, my mom was just a house servant. She just did everything for him. He never had any meaningful conversation with her. He would just tell her what to do, and she did it. And I think that's like a mask that he had that just slipped off for a second, and I saw the person the actual robot that he was. So externally to, so for example, my mother actually had a friend who is a foster carer, or she worked in social services. She was one of those people who worked in social services. And my mother had this friend because when I was younger and when my mother was alive, she used to take care of one of my cousins who was quite severely disabled. He had a developmental delay and he couldn't talk, couldn't really, his movements were very sporadic. Like he couldn't really walk, he would walk very heavily, and he didn't learn to walk until he was around 10, 13 years old, 10 to 13. So we used to look after this boy, and he had a social worker, and my mum was very good friends with this social worker. Every time the social worker came around, my dad was very charming with her. Actually, when I told her what had happened with my dad and me, and what had happened was that I went through a severe case of physical abuse and other things that went on in my house, which included an attempted suicide, child abuse, neglect, in all forms in terms of food, heating, resources, schooling, neglect in every aspect. When I told her all of that, she could not believe it at all. And I basically had to tell her that, look, I'm telling you what has happened. At the time, I needed someone in the system to sign or give me a reference for something. And that is why I called her, because I didn't really know her in the same way my mother and my father did. So when I called her, she was in complete shock, because every time that she spoke to him, when anyone spoke to him, when social workers from our council came to talk to us about an attempted suicide in our house, he was very charming with that social worker. And this is something that narcissists or sociopaths do, is they have a part to play. They're very good actors. And that is what, when people would talk to me and ask me about my dad, they would always be like, why do you talk as though you were really good friends? And I would always say, because we used to talk to each other so much. And we would talk about religion and things like that. And what I now realize that maybe I didn't realize when I was younger, because I had idolized my dad, was that he always was talking at me. I was never really allowed to question anything he said. If I did, he would kind of yell at me. But because he was my dad, I just took it as like, that's what a parent does. And he's a pure narcissist. I've never seen him carry true emotions. Even when my mother passed away and we had gone to see her body, the amount that he was crying and the amount that he had grieved thereafter was very minimal. I don't know if those tears were at all genuine. When he cried and he held me, it felt like an act. It felt, even then I didn't really think about it, but looking back, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, it always felt like an act. It felt like he was crying because everyone else was crying. And one of the first things he said to me after my mother had passed away is that now everything's fallen on you being me. And I didn't get that, because he's the parent. I was the eldest in my family. I'm the oldest sibling. I'm the oldest sister. And he had said that everything has fallen on me. And it didn't hit me then and there that I would have to look after everything, but that's just how it happened. I just ended up looking after everything. But forward from my dad, after I left his house, I was in an online relationship with a man who was 11 years older than me. And I had asked a few friends whether or not that was weird, because at the time I was around 21. And he was 32. We'll call him Derek. I've mentioned Derek before. And Derek was a very nice guy. He had one huge problem, which was that he was an alcoholic. And for some reason, that didn't bother me, ever. And I've spoken to members of Derek's family before and after he broke up with me. And they have said that he always brings home these nice girls, and they always leave him, and we never understand why, because he never talks about them. Okay, so Derek is a very charming guy. Derek is a wonderful, wonderful, charming person who will opt to pay for everything for you and will show some interest in the things that you are interested in. And after a while, Derek will bring up the fact that he has paid for things and that somehow you owe him because of that. And that was one of the things that I could never accept from Derek, because my dad used to do the same thing, where if he bought you something or if he made you something, my dad never apologized for anything, ever. The way that he would apologize was by making me food. and he would assume that the matter's put to bed because I ate the food that he forced me to eat because he made it. Um, and it's really weird because I was with Derek for nearly 3 years. And looking back, some of my friends always had suspicions that he wasn't okay. So he was an alcoholic, he had a very obsessive personality, and I think I went into the relationship thinking that I could fix him. And I don't want to be the kind of person who fixes people. I like letting people be people. My current significant other, who I love very, very much, is nothing like Derek, and I love him, and I hope to be with him for a very, very long time. However, Derek was also someone that I hoped to be with for a very, very long time. He actually proposed, and we were supposed to get married. But it was a very fast movement because he had proposed to me, I think, about a year and a half after we'd been together. And most of my friends didn't understand it, and I think he lived in the US, first of all. So he wanted me to leave my entire family and go and live with him in the US, leave my friends, leave my country, which I love. I love the UK and I love being a British citizen. He wanted me to leave everything and go and live with him. And I am forever grateful for the choice to not do that because he would have separated me from everyone, and had I done anything wrong, he would have told me to go back and I would have nothing. I want to tell you how this story ends before I go further. Derek broke up with me because I got a tattoo on my knee. And this was a man who wanted to marry me, who thought I was the most perfect human being he had ever met, who professed as much. I'm not just saying that for brownie points. He actually said things like that to me. And he had said that he had never proposed to another girl in his life, except me. And he had dated over 400 women in the US, and he would never find someone else like me. Yet he broke up with me because I had decided to get a tattoo. And his reasoning for that was that I was now tainted in some way or damaged, and he had expressly told me that he would no longer talk to me until I had gotten the tattoo removed. And that if I continued to have it and we continued this relationship, he would never be able to really make love to me because I was so hideous. The tattoo is on my knee, just in case I hadn't mentioned that. It is nowhere on my face or in any intimate areas. It is on my knee. And the thing that he told his family and his close friends was that I had gotten a demonic symbol on my inner thigh and he couldn't marry me anymore. He still emails me. That is the thing. Like, I have tried to block him. I've blocked him on most of my social media. I've blocked him on my Facebook. I've blocked him on everything. I've blocked him on Twitter. I've blocked him on WhatsApp. I've taken his number out of my phone. I have blocked his number. But the only thing that he keeps interacting with me through is email. I've blocked one of his email addresses. He keeps making new ones and emailing me anyway. So I have just made a file for him to send all his messages to directly, and I will open those when I feel like laughing about something, because it is ridiculous. He keeps saying how he didn't understand at the time when he immediately, with no discussion, wanted to break up with me. He didn't understand that I had chosen to do something for myself, and now he's constantly asking for me back. This is what they do, unfortunately. What they do is they try to control you financially and try to control what you do because you are a thing to them. So if, for example, I think one of the biggest arguments we had before this whole tattoo fiasco was that he kept telling me how to spend my money. I had recently been separated from my father. I was given a bank account, I was given a brand new passport, I was given a ticket to my new life, and I was earning money. I had a job as a teaching assistant. And I will admit wholeheartedly, I was not good at regulating my finances. I would impulse spend a lot. I've gotten better at it, but I am still considerably not the best at it. And at the time, I was doing that a lot. But every time I would tell him that I was doing something, or I'd bought a snack on the way home, or I hadn't made a certain level of money at the end of the month, because he would ask about that, he would have a huge go at me. And at one point, I exploded. I asked him if he always micromanaged his relationships and whether that was something that he would continue to do as we continued the relationship. And he hung up on me immediately. And I texted him and I said, "Why did you hang up on me?" And he said, "How dare you talk to me like that?" Meanwhile, in his drunken rage, he has called me so many things. He had said so many things to me, but those things weren't important because I had yelled at him. They have to be in a position of power. um, but that is something that I have noticed between him and my dad. You can't talk back to them. You talk back to them, it is the hugest offence you can do. I remember the most harsh thing I've ever said to him directly was to shut up, because he kept yelling at me. And I told him to shut up, and he just kind of went, "How dare you talk to me like that?" Meanwhile, he was calling me a cunt, he was calling me a bitch, he was calling me all kinds of names that you do not call the woman you want to marry. You never do. And the way that he was saying it was very aggressively, like he was coming at me. And I told him to shut up. Not shut the fuck up. No other words, just literally just to shut up. And he held on to that for the entirety of the rest of the relationship. And he would always go on about how, "Do you remember that time where you told me to shut up? Do you remember all those times?" But with him, he would always blame it on something else. That's another thing. It's never their fault. It's never their fault when they do something to you. It's always something else's fault or someone else's fault. With my dad, it was always like, "Oh, but you made me angry." With him, it was always like, "Oh, I was drunk." Okay. And I think that's a recurring theme with narcissists. They just want to control you. That's it. From beginning to end, the way you spend your money, who you spend your time with. This was another thing. My dad could not stand me spending time with any of my other relatives, like my cousins or my aunts or my uncles, and or Derek. Derek could not stand me hanging out with my male friends. It was a shit show from beginning to end. And he would really, he wouldn't stop me because he wasn't physically here. He couldn't physically stop me from going anywhere. But when I had spent time, one of my best friends, he's a boy, he's 2 years younger than me. He's like a little brother to me, and I only get to see him like once a year. And Derek had basically told me after I'd gone to see him that, "What do I tell my friends?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "How do I tell my friends that my fiancé at the time was spending an entire day with another man, as if I was cheating on him?" He never trusted me enough to spend time with my male friends without him supervising us. And even when I did want him to connect with my friend Simon, he would always go around it in some way or say that he was uncomfortable because he was another guy. And I never understood it. And the reason I think that is because it was like this complex where you can't allow another man into your territory. Something my dad used to say is the reason he had a problem with my brother and him they never got on well. And my brother, again, was 2 years younger than me, my actual brother. And he would say that the reason he never felt comfortable with my brother, or he would always have physical altercations with my brother, and my brother was a skinny little thing, he never fought back, he would be abused horrendously by my father. And the reason he said was that I always feel like he's a challenge to me. He always challenges me, because my brother would blatantly disobey him without hiding it. And that was why that he did those things. And it's not a good reason, but it's what they do. They cannot stand another man or another force of control or disobedience. They can't stand that. And I don't know if I'm just rambling at this point because this might just be common knowledge, but to me it doesn't seem so common because I always fall for these guys. Even when I started dating after I broke up with my ex, I started dating physically with people who went in other countries. I would always fall for these guys who were very dominant, and I am a very independent person. I don't like being told what to do. I'm okay with people telling me what to do. I just don't like being told what to do. I don't like being treated like a child, which is something my father and my ex used to do. No matter how old I had gotten or how much I had achieved, I would always be treated like I hadn't done anything. And I would always fall for these guys who would do these things, would do these same recurring things. And I guess to a point, I realized that I fall for these guys who I want approval from, i.e. daddy issues. I have serious daddy issues. I went to therapy for a lot of my issues. I had bereavement issues because of my mum, and I never got to grieve for her until I started going to therapy. So I had bereavement issues, I have daddy issues, I have trust issues, I have a lot of issues because of how I was brought up and everything that happened to me. And I went to therapy and I was talking about it with my therapist, and he gave me a set of rules that I want to share. And I think the biggest rule is never get into a relationship to fix someone because you think you can help them. people don't change unless they actively want to change. They are not going to change for you. They're not going to change for anyone else. And if they do change, it's a lot of the time, unless they have actively made that choice, if they say that they are changing for you, a lot of the time it's a ploy to, because Derek did say things like that, where he would be like, I'll give up drinking for a month for you. And he would do it, and then he would be back to the same. The guy used to have like 2 handles of vodka every night. I don't know what he's doing now. I don't really care. He, really hurt me. And it messed me up for a little while, where I was just looking for male approval, and it was terrible. But that's what I mean. I don't know if this is any way helpful, but the first rule is don't get into a relationship to help someone. It's a bad idea. Second rule is if this person is telling you what to do with your body, telling you that you look ugly because of something you did to your hair, for example, big red flag. Stop dating a person who tells you how to look for them. Obviously, people can make suggestions. Hey, I think you're gaining too much weight. Hey, I think you're eating way too much. But if they are constantly going on about how you shouldn't do your hair in a certain way, I don't like you wearing that much makeup. I don't like how you've gotten a tattoo and I want to break up because of that, because you should be a perfect, spotless human for me. Get out. Just stop with that person. Don't let anyone tell you what to do with your money. If you have a money problem, if you have a problem with spending money frivolously, you need to attack that head on individually. Like I said, people don't change unless they want to change, and you have to make the effort to change. But no one should be telling you how much you should have saved and how you're a failure because you haven't saved. And that is something that both my father and Derek have done. They have told me, they've always tried to put me down because I wasn't a certain level above them. The amount of things that I had achieved in that year that I had gotten with and was earning money. I had, gotten a job, was earning about the same as him monthly. I was just spending it. And he would always go off on how I'm a failure and I hadn't done enough, and how he was way more successful. And he was 11 years older than me, so I would hope that he was a lot more successful than me. But that's one of those things. It's don't let anyone tell you that you are a failure when you're trying as hard as you can to do something. And I think the other final point would be wary of how they argue with you, because men argue in a very specific way and women argue in a very specific way. And the way that my father and Derek argued, both of them, it was very, very feminine, the way they argued. And like I said, I always fall for the same type of guys. The way that Derek and my dad used to argue is that they would guilt trip. They would take something that they knew I was insecure about or I was uncomfortable about, and they would use that as a fighting point instead of arguing about what we're supposed to be arguing about. And people argue in relationships just because you argue in a relationship doesn't mean it's not working. It's about how the argument goes. If the argument is not kept in a pocket, if it goes out into these other subjects, you're not in the right fight. And you're definitely not with the right people. So something that Derek had said to me that I don't think I'll ever forget, to be honest, was that it's no wonder that people in your culture get married off so early, is because you stop maturing. Or he would say that, I'm glad your dad beat you up. Or he would say, I hope that the guy you get with next watches out because he's going to commit suicide in 2 years. And it's things like that. They really hit you with things, because I had issues with suicidal thoughts and self-harm and stuff like that before. I'm fine now, so don't worry about it. I had eating disorder. I have a slight eating disorder. I had, I was coerced, I wouldn't say forced, but I was definitely pressured to get married when I was 15 and up until I left. And he would bring these, and obviously my dad abused me, and that doesn't need to be said, but he would bring these things up into a fight about finances, and it would make no sense. He brought that into the fight about my tattoo, and how he said that it's no wonder that your dad beat you up if you just did things like this. My dad, just to clarify, my dad beat me up for something small, in the same way that Derek broke up with me because I got a tattoo. My dad beat me up because the house wasn't clean, and I'd allowed my siblings to watch cartoons. That's why he had decided to punish me so severely. And it's not because of what has happened, it's because of disobedience. That's their big thing. And that's more or less my 2 cents and my experience on narcissists. They don't really want help, from the two that I have known and the few that I've dated, they seem to think that what they're doing is okay, even though Derek sends me an email every few days, every few months, saying how sorry he is. This is what they do. They fake sorry, and then they do shit like breaking up with you because you get a tattoo, or beating you up because the house isn't clean. That's my 2 cents on narcissists. I didn't really get too many questions about them. I didn't want to address any questions if anybody had any. I will be happy to address questions if anyone who is watching this has any in the next video. But that is what I wanted to talk about. And there was something else in my head that I wanted to say. This is very, you know me. My thoughts are all over the place. But I think those people are very drawn to religion because it allows them to, it gives them a yardstick to control people with. And it's, it's a mess. It's a mess, and I think that it needs to be talked about more, and I think people should, talk about their experiences more, no matter how difficult it is for them to talk about it, no matter how difficult it is to revisit things like that. I feel like most people that I have spoken to have told me that they know someone like that, but yet no one talks about it. And it's, to me, it seems horrendous. I'm sorry for the noise. I will see you in the next one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you agree with me, let me know. Comment down below. Share, like, subscribe. I know this video has been very slow and I've been pausing a lot. It's just my thoughts are, like, when I think about things like this, they're all a mess. And I need to consolidate them. And that's kind of why I made the video. But if you can relate, let me know. And I will see you in the next one. I'm going to have a lovely dinner. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday morning. But yeah.